So that's Fathom into the workshop now. I'm going to start stripping out all the back box, get all these boards out as usual, take loads of photos of everything just so I know where it all goes back together. So we'll get all that stripped out, Playfield out, and get all the cabinets stripped down, and then I'm going to take this whole back box down to the paint shop and get them to scan these colours so we can get as close as we can to them, so that when it all gets sprayed up again we keep it as close to original as possible. So there we go, that is everything stripped out of it. Just got to pull that earth braiding out, but what I'm going to do is actually mark where it goes first. I'm going to draw a little diagram so I'll make sure it all goes back in the right place, because with this one I'm going to sand down the inside of the cabinet and spray all that as well. Make it a proper job. Well, I've just got back from the paint shop. I've taken the head of this down and they have knocked me up these colours, which on the face of it, if you look at that, it doesn't look very close, but when you put it up together, I don't know how it will come out on the camera, but it does actually look pretty close to what we're aiming for there. So hopefully it should come out well, and it's all water-based stuff, because then it's easier to spray with, and they're a lot better than they used to be, all the acrylic stuff these days. So now I can strip all the cabinet down, get it all sanded down. Obviously I couldn't do that before, because if I wrecked the colours I couldn't really get them matched. So now the cabinet's completely stripped down, so I'm going to start sanding it and getting the preparation work done. So that's the last of the bits removed from inside the cabinet. I've got all the last nuts and bolts out and all the braiding, pulled all the little staples out that was holding the braiding in. As you can see, it's completely empty. So now I'm going to start sanding this down, the cabinet. We've got to get rid of, well, I mean obviously all the little imperfections in the wood anyway, get it nice and smooth, but also there are things like numbers stamped in. I'm assuming this was originally when it was manufactured. We got repairs to do, because there are, if I push that gap will, if you can see that, close up, so the cabinet's a bit unstable. So once I've got it sanded down I need to do that. So to sand it down I use my trusty old sander here with a dust extraction. So now I'm going to take off all this lovely artwork. Right, so that has now been filled and sanded about 5 times to within an inch of its life. So it's ready to have a first coat now, which will obviously show up another load of imperfections which I'll have to sort out. So basically tomorrow I'm going to give it a spray with the base coat of blue, see what it comes up like. So the cabinet and back box have now been sprayed inside and out with a coat of primer, which will basically show up any other imperfections that I need to fill on there. So now I'm just going to flat all that off and put a first coat of the blue down, which is the base coat. Right, so that's the final coat of the base coat, the blue, gone on. That's 4 coats so far now, including a primer. Well, no, not including the primer, it's 5 coats including the primer. So basically I've sanded it all down, then done all the filling, then I sprayed it with a primer undercoat. I actually tried, first time I've ever tried using a spray gun, and it was rubbish, but luckily it was just tried with a primer. You can see some of it there, how horrendous it is. This has all got to be sprayed black, so it doesn't really matter. So then all that was sanded down, then filled all the imperfections again, then 2 coats of the blue, which basically I've put on with a brush, just an ordinary brush, and then roller it out with this fine foam roller, and basically it gets rid of all the brush marks, and it is really smooth to the touch now. Then between every coat of paint it gets sanded down very lightly with 800 grade wet and dry, and then just before the last coat went on I sanded it off with some 1200, so it's sort of really smooth. So now I'm going to leave that to cure for, well, at least a week I think now, just so that it goes really hard, because when I put the decals on, or the stencils, I don't want any of this peeling off when they get removed, so I want this to go really hard. I mean, it's meant to dry within 24 hours, but I'd rather have it that little extra bit. In the meantime, when that's drying, after this has been gone a couple of days, I'll get all this sorted out with the black, and then we can get ready to put the stencils on, which I'm looking forward to. Right, so I'm just going to quickly spray all this black. Basically I've just masked it up, putting some of this stuff called frog tape round first. I don't know if you can see it, so that basically it doesn't let bleed over from the spray go onto the other paint, so it gives a nice crisp line. So what you do is you just put a line of that first, and then use ordinary masking tape to put the newspaper on to protect it from overspray, if that makes sense. So now I'm just going to spray that with rattle cans, because it's really awkward to get all in here and get a good finish on it. So we'll do that, and we'll let that one go off as well. Right, so here we go. The head and the cabinet are painted. I've left that to go off for probably to cure properly for about 3 weeks now, so I'm not going to have any issues, because my worry was putting the stencils on and then peeling them off and the paint coming off with them, but I don't think I'm going to have any issues with that now. As you can see, it's a nice satin finish. You can probably see the dust sheet down there reflected, but not perfectly, which is what we're after, because it's not a gloss finish on these. So now I'm going to put the stencils on, which I have here from Pinball Pimp. Now, just to be awkward, you've got to put them in on 2 goes. So basically you put one layer on, and then you paint it one colour, take them off, let that go hard, and then paint the next colour on top of that. Just to be awkward, I think on the cabinet we've got to do the green first, and on the head, as you can see on there, we've got to do the blue first. So it's just going to mean more cleaning out of rollers, etc. So now I'm going to apply them. I think you put the one on the head here first, because then you can line up anything that goes down the side. It's very similar to decaling a more modern game with the proper decals. Then you can line the sides up with the head so it doesn't mismatch. So I'm going to go ahead and put them on, and then we'll come back for the painting. Right, so I positioned the stencil on the front and did the 2 little lines. It's only got 2 green lines on the front, but now I've positioned the other decal for the side, and just making this line here line up with the green underneath, and now I'm going to peel that back and stick that in place. What I've done is just position it right all the way round, just making sure all the edges are the same. Then I'll put these heavy blocks on to keep it in position, and I'm going to peel it back probably so far, stick this half down, or the third, and then take the blocks off, so that'll position it for the rest of them. But okay, so that's the backing peeled off of there. Then I'll cut that through there. Make sure I've got rid of any bits and dust off to the side. Then it's sort of a bit like putting the decals on the more modern machines, but you don't have to be so fussy with it at this stage. Just try not to lose any big air bubbles. and obviously no creases. So then we can take these blocks off. Pull that back. And then repeat on the other side. But I'm just going to move the camera out because I need to stay on the other side for this one. Don't know how exciting this is, seeing exactly the same thing happening. I'm not too worried about the big wide areas. It's around these areas where the paint's going to go through that I'm paying more attention to. Because unlike some, I'm not spraying this, I'm actually putting it on with a roller. So I don't have to worry so much about with all the overspray, etc. So that's on there. Now I've got to peel this off. I'm going to do a bit at a time because it's actually quite stiff. So you've got to make sure this edge here doesn't peel off with it. But then once you start, it's quite satisfying this. It's like pulling off wallpaper. Now you've just got to be careful when you get to these bits where it could lift with the direction that you're pulling, if that makes sense. Probably just going to speed this bit up now so you don't have to go all through this. And there you have it. So now that's peeled off, as you can see there are a lot, I don't know if you can see, there are a lot of bubbles in there, but I'm not worried about those at all. I'm just going to go around now and roller over all these edges here, because obviously that is the edge. We don't want any paint getting under to give us a nice crisp line. And as you can see, the front bit lines up, so the green should match all of that. So I'm going to go back over all of that and then we'll put some paint on. Okay, well here goes the second most scary part. There's a roller in this on. Basically it's just, I'm using a foam roller because it gives a really smooth finish, and this paint is actually acrylic satin wood, I think I might have said before. So I'm going to go 2 coats, so I'm going to go completely round once and then wait for probably 15 minutes and then go again. How worried would you be? What's the worst that could happen? Obviously if you were spraying this you'd need a lot more protection, but this is the beauty of doing it this way, hopefully, if it all works out okay. I'm just making sure everything's even. Obviously it looks like it's covering better on the white because it hasn't got such a dark background. When I did the little bit on the front I was quite worried about this because it didn't look like it was covering, but the second coat it comes up really well. This is a bit I'm looking forward to, the tail. There we go, that's the first side done. Go around the other side and then back to this one. Okay, so that's had 3 coats now. So now we've got the moment of truth. It's still, the paint's still wet, because if it dried it would obviously stick to the decal and the cabinet and it wouldn't tear cleanly. That's the theory anyway. So I'm just going to pull this off, and again I'm going to put it slowly. I'm going to tear it so along that first bit, so I'm not trying to pull the whole thing off at once. And as well, I'm pulling it flat to the cabinet so that it doesn't rip, hopefully tear any chunks of the blue paint off. And I'm not imagining for a second there's going to be some bits that don't need touching up. But I think even on the originals, obviously, I don't think they would have taken this much care over them. There would have been bits that, you know, the lines wouldn't have been that crisp between the green and the blue. A couple of small flakes of blue have come off there, but in the final thing we can go around with a small brush and touch them up. There we go, looking nice so far. These decals are designed to leave this little square on each end so that we can line the next layer of decals up easily. Right, these are going to be awkward shapes around the letters, so I've got a feeling I'm going to have to do a bit at a time and go slowly. Right, some minor touching in to do after that, but I'm pretty happy, to be honest. Now I'm just going to leave that to cure properly for sort of probably 3 days or so, and then we'll come back and do the next one. But now I've got to go and do the blue on the head box, back box now. Okay, so the paint that I put on in the first layer has been curing for just over a week, or drying properly. So now I'm going to put the next coat on, which is the blue on the cabinet, because obviously this was the green and it went first. On the back box I've got to do the green next, but first I'm going to do this. So again, I've got to put the next layer of decals or stencils on. Now it's quite clever this, because when I peeled the first set off, it's left this little square with a cross on, and this lines up, if I can find it, with the hole that's cut out of the next layer. So quite a clever little way of making it nice and neat, getting it lined up, and takes a lot. It's a lot quicker to do. So now I'm going to put my weights on here, get this in the right place, and do exactly as I did before. Peel half back and stick it on. I'm going to do this end first before I then put the cabinet. I'm going to paint it and everything, do the lot, and then I can put it up the other way so that I can do both sides at once. So here we go. Okay, so that's the second layer put on the front. It's all worked out okay as far as I can tell. I've applied the second decals or stencils down the side. I keep calling them decals, I'm used to newer machines. So obviously I'm quite looking forward to how these are going to come out. All the crosses lined up well. I've put this tape over because there is a tiny, I'm just worried about paint seeping through there. But apart from that, it's all good. They come up a little bit short at the end, but I've got a feeling actually that all the originals used to do that as well. So I'll just paint right up to that edge. Obviously it's the back of the machine, so it's not going to matter that much. So that's it. 2 coats of paint on there, and wait for it to go off of it, and then I'll peel them back. So now the cabinet's well underway, we've got to start work on the playfield. Now a lot of this stuff has been replaced. By the look of it, all the pop bumpers, pop bumper caps, so there's a lot of new stuff on here, and the actual back of the playfield is actually rather nice. So it's all obviously all been taken apart and cleaned up at some time. But as you can see, the playfield is a little bit ropey. It's had a mylar put all over here, so if that was lifted it would just take everything with it. I mean, to be honest, it's not bad really for a Fathom of this age, but a little bit ropey. So there is this lovely new CPR playfield here, which looks absolutely gorgeous. Not often you see them all out like this. It's a really nice playfield actually, because it's got the sort of whole story. There's the girl on the top of the lake there, and you know, the divers and the mermaids, and it comes right down to the bottom, so it gives you an opportunity to see it for what it is. You never realise when it's all covered up with all that stuff, but there you go. So I'm going to start stripping that one down and get everything swapped over. I've just started stripping down any surface bits so I can get off this playfield and mounting them on the new one before I get stuck into the back. But as usual with these repro ones, there's a lot of holes that are missing that I'm having to drill. A lot of the ones, for example, where that one-way gate is there on this playfield, on the new one, they weren't big enough, so quite often you get it where the clear coat needs clearing out of the holes where it gets sprayed down the edge, but they physically weren't big enough for the parts to go through. And also there's a lot missing. You see where this ball guide is here, there is nothing at all to put that into, so all that's going to have to be measured out. And some also quite major ones, like the holes top of that palm tree there and on the girl's head, which these wherever I've done with them, these little posts go into. There is absolutely nothing on here, so a lot of fiddling about and drilling of stuff, but it's got to be done, so crack on with it, and then I'm going to start stripping the back down. So I'm just getting ready to swap all the under playfield stuff over. I'm going to start with all the insert lights to start with. And now on these older games, I think I said before, all of the neutral wire is actually stapled to the back of the playfield, and each one is soldered to the light, which is a bit of a pain in the backside, because each one you physically got to cut the wires, take these off and swap them one by one. So what I decided to do is, I've never done a game of this age before, I basically marked in very light pencil where all of the wires go, so basically I can take off one lamp holder at a time, swap it to its position. And what I'm also going to do is, like for example this wire, I will cut it and leave probably sort of 5mm on the end so I can see what colour, because you can see in this cluster here there are 4 wires go to it, and they're all different colours, so I can basically just find the one and solder it back on. When I relay this loom in the right place, hopefully all these will come where they are. I mean, obviously I've taken loads of photos anyway, so basically I'm going to take them off one at a time, move all the lamp holders over to this one, and then hopefully I can unscrew all the major mechanisms, and then move this whole lot, the whole wiring loom, as one big lump, with some assistance from my lovely wife. So right, I'm going to start going on that. It's probably going to take quite a while. I do actually, instead of a soldering iron for these things, I use one of these heat guns, because they're obviously big lumps of solder, and these things, it just works on a trigger, and it's very powerful. It's no good for anything fine, but for stuff like that it's pretty good, because it gets really hot really quickly, so it'll speed things along a bit. So there we go. Right, so I've got the majority of all the lighting swapped over, all the GI stuff, which are the ones that are sunk in here, and then all the ones for the inserts as well. It's actually surprising with these, the first time I've done a solid state playfield, how long it has taken to do all of this. It's probably about 8 hours to swap that lot over. As I've been going along and doing it, I've swapped all the bulbs, because as usual with all of these, they're a bit disgusting, so it's worth doing them because they're quite awkward to get to, really, because with these you've actually got to physically bend these holders back to get them out. So now I'm just going to disconnect everything on here, and hopefully I will be able to lift this whole loom over with everything else on it, and then just reconnect it all up a bit, you know, so obviously solder all these wires back on to all the bulb holders, and everything will work perfectly. Not. So what I've ended up doing after a lot of debate is basically, obviously I think I said earlier, all of that's done and wired now, so I've disconnected everything off of this playfield and literally just slid this board underneath it, you know, and lifted the bits over as I slid the board. So now everything is roughly in its position, so I can now carry that board over and just slide everything off roughly in place onto this playfield, and then hopefully it won't get too confusing when I come to wire it all back up, because obviously, as you can see, there are a lot of cut wires, which hopefully I've labelled up, but time will tell. I was just going to say, with regard to these star switches here, on CPR's instructions, they basically say the extra clear coat round here, you should pick it all out, then put these inserts in upside down, and then if they rock all the way around like that, then they're good to go. Well, I've just done that with this one and a couple more I foolishly tried, and they don't work very well, so I'm having to pull it out, and I found the best way is actually to get a bit of wet and dry paper like this and physically go round and sand each one, because otherwise they're just not getting cleared. And also you can do, I don't know if you can see that down the centre where this post actually inserts in, then that needs to have a round bit, you know, if you sort of roll a bit of wet and dry up, you can poke it in there and sand the rough bits off. But yeah, bit of a pain really, it's taken a long time. And then of course what you don't want to do, or it's painful to do, is get these things out again, because you don't want to break off the little clips inside. So that's going to be a bit of fun in a little while. Right, so all the boards are back in and wired up. Playfield's in. There's still a few bits and pieces I've got to do to it, a few bits to go on, and I've got to clear all these out with these new clear coated playfields. These star things stick in there. They're a real pain actually to clear out, because if you chip away too much, the clear actually lifts and damages. So I'm sort of trying to pick out as little as possible, but then they stick down. But anyway, I've got to do a bit of faffing about with that. We lift the playfield. It's all ready to go underneath. Everything's wired back in, well, as best I can. So I'm going to do the big switch on now and see if it works. It'll either explode or it'll be fine. I've got to admit, I'm not normally too worried about these sort of things, but given the amount of rewiring with all the earth braiding and stuff, it's a little bit more worrying than a normal pinball machine. But I shall stick the camera up on the tripod and you can share in the pain or jubilation. Right, here we go. I'm going to plug it in the wall first and switch it on, just in case it's already switched on the machine. No? Okay. Here we go. Everything crossed. Oh, that's hopeful. Okay. Well, we've got GI and an error message, but nothing's blown up, so that's good. So switch that off and get to diagnosing it. So there we are, all back together, up and working. I made the schoolboy error when it didn't fire up when I first switched it on, of not putting the balls in it, so it sort of locked itself up. And not working on these older machines very often, I forget about stuff like that. So I put the balls in and it just fired straight up into a tract and it plays fine now. So that's all good. So it's looking rather nice now. Compared to what it did do. I've got to admit, it's a lot more work than a modern game, especially under the playfield. And with these reproduction playfields, there were a lot of posts, etc., that weren't drilled or dimpled that I had to do. But it's probably taken, I think, probably 50% longer than doing a more modern one with decals. Well worth it though. So there we go, on to the next project. I think it's a Tommy next.